In New Haven, Connecticut, 5 police officers are now facing charges in connection with an incident that goes back to last June, where a black man became paralyzed when he's being transported in a police van. Magda Gabriel-Selassie is in Washington with some details that made a lot of headlines then and is again in the wake of these charges. Magda, give us the details of what happened in the month of June.
So Randy Cox was arrested there on June 19th, and he was put in the back of a transport van without a seat belt. He was handcuffed, his arms behind his back. And after the officer slams on the brakes to avoid an accident, this is where it happened. We're not going to show this part of the video. It is disturbing, but that is the point of impact where Cox slams into the back of that video. And afterwards, he is lying there and he says he's calling out for help. He calls for an ambulance, but instead he's actually taken to the station. And the video appears to show officers dragging him out of that van by his legs, putting him in a wheelchair and into a cell. There was an investigation that occurred soon after that, and now you have these 5 officers that have been charged. So those officers are Sergeant Betsy Segui, officers Oscar Diaz, Ronald Presley, Jocelyn Lavendier, and Luis Rivera. So they have been charged with second-degree reckless endangerment and cruelty to persons. These are misdemeanors. They are not felonies. Here is the police chief reacting to the charges yesterday.
You cannot treat people the way Mr. Cox was treated. It's hard to see officers charged, but it's also part of what we've been talking about since the beginning. We need to be transparent and accountable, period. And that's what is going on today.
After this happened, there were calls for accountability from Cox's family, from community members, from his legal team. Take a listen to his representative, one of his lawyers, reacting to these charges.
What's happened here today is never going to change the fact that Randy Cox is paralyzed and that his life since June 19th, since Juneteenth of 2022 has been irreparably altered. And this is the rest of his life and what he's faced with.
Now, the charges that Cox was facing, those charges were dropped. He has now filed a legal lawsuit against the city, against the police. This is a lawsuit of $100 million seeking accountability and responsibility in this case.
There were, as I understand it, Magda, a number of reforms made to police operations as a result of this case. I'm wondering what the police union is saying about these charges.
Yeah, so the police union released a statement calling the whole case a tragedy for all. It says it's going to continue to support the officers through the process and is released a statement saying that guilt, innocence, liability, or culpability will be determined later. For now, due process and the protections it provides must be honored so that this case is handled in the most prudent, proper, and professional manner possible. And yes, Heather, as you said, there have been changes, including seatbelts now in those vans, vans like the one in this incident.
Magda Gabriel-Selassie from Washington, thank you very much.
Tonight, a former Kansas police officer appearing in court, accused of a string of disturbing crimes.
Go over the evidence that the state has against you.
51-year-old Todd Allen, a 20-year veteran of the force, charged with 24 counts of sex crimes, many taking place while he was still in uniform.
I am appalled and disgusted that somebody who is a suspect in these type of crimes and this type of behavior ever wore the uniform and this badge that I am honored to pin on my chest every day.
Allen faces charges ranging from rape and aggravated sexual battery to kidnapping, breach of privacy, and eavesdropping.
Do you understand the 24 charges and the complaint the state's filed against you and the possible penalties that could apply?
Yes.
Allen did not enter a plea today. His family did not return calls for comment.
I came into the agency in 2018. Shortly thereafter, within 3 weeks, we had a sexual assault that occurred in one of our parks here in the city of Hutchinson. And at that time, I was notified by my staff that that assault was related to a series of assaults that had been occurring in the city of Hutchinson since 2012.
Most of the accusations against him come from a 6-year period while he was serving as a patrol officer. Some victims claim their attacker approached them saying he was a police officer or security guard, convinced them to get out of their cars, and then assaulted them.
Police work can be conducive to sexual misconduct because most people perceive police officers as individuals who are in charge. And so not only does it create intimidating acts, so when a police officer tells someone to do something, most people will act in accordance with what the police officer orders.
In November 2018, Chief Jeffrey Hopper held the first public press conference on the issue.
You never know what type of information may actually break the case for us.
After the news conference, police say the incidents appeared to stop, and around the same time, Allen resigned from his post, ending his 20-year career. But according to charging documents, police allege Allen resumed criminal behavior in 2019.
We started having a series of prowler calls and window peeping calls that were occurring.
It was those more recent crimes that led them to make the arrest.
Sergeant Leslie and Lieutenant Lepp were able to piece those cases together and gather enough information that led them to believe that those prowler calls were related to the sexual assaults that occurred between 2012 and 2018. The district attorney's office this morning filed charges in those particular cases, and a warrant was issued.
All right, Steve Patterson joins us now from L.A. And Steve, another thing interesting about this case, even though the suspect here was one of their own, allegedly one of their own, the police department never classified these as cold cases. They kept investigating them?
At no point, Tom. In fact, the chief says those cases remained active and is always assigned to a detective where they were actively worked for years. Meanwhile, authorities clearly believe more victims are out there. Tonight, they're calling on the public to come forward. Tom.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
Officer charged with murder after a traffic stop in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Officer Christopher Schur accused of shooting Patrick Lyoya in the back of the head. ABC's Alex Perez in Grand Rapids tonight.
Tonight, the Michigan police officer captured on camera fatally shooting Patrick Lyoya, charged with murder.
Taking a look at everything that I reviewed in this case, I believe there's a sufficient basis to proceed on a single count of second-degree murder, and that charge has been filed.
The charge against Grand Rapids officer Christopher Schur comes after a 2-month-long investigation. Schur turning himself into authorities.
Stay in the car! Stay in the car!
The ordeal unfolding back on April 4th. Video shows Schur pulling over 26-year-old Lyoya for a license plate issue.
The plate doesn't belong on this car.
Lyoya, when asked for a driver's license, shuts the car door and begins to walk away.
No. Stop. Put your hands right.
When Schur tries to detain him, Lyoya takes off running. They then struggle over the stun gun as Schur deploys it. Schur, now on top of Lyoya, pulls out his gun and fires, appearing to shoot Lyoya in the back of the head. Since the incident, protesters taking to the streets several times demanding justice. Tonight, Lyoya's family, who immigrated to the United States after escaping violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo, saying they won't give up until the officer is convicted.
Don't get tired, don't give up, because the fight is still hard and ahead of us. Don't give up, just keep fighting.
And David Schur is due to be arraigned tomorrow. The police union defending his action, saying an officer has a right to protect themselves. The police chief says he will recommend to the city manager that Schur be fired. David?
All right, Alex, thank you.